They thought taking down a black teenager during a traffic stop was just another Tuesday. They called it justified. But they never imagined his father was a retired sergeant major who trained men for war. And war was coming. Marcus Reap Washington, sergeant major, retired, moved with a quiet economy that belied the storm in his soul. At 58, the former Green Beret carried the posture of a man who had commanded respect in places where words were cheap and action was everything. Now, he commanded a different kind of platoon, the at-risk youth at the community center he'd founded, teaching them discipline not with drills, but with dignity. His greatest source of pride, however, was his son. Andre Washington was 19, and he was the embodiment of his father's best hopes. An honor student, the star cadet of his high school's JROTC program, and a young man with a letter of likely acceptance to West Point. He was everything the streets were not: focused, honorable, and full of a future he had earned. He wasn't a corner boy, he was a future officer. That future ended on a Tuesday night, under the cold, indifferent buzz of a streetlight. Andre was driving home in his meticulously kept 10-year-old sedan, the one he'd bought with his own money. The red and blue lights that filled his rearview mirror were sudden and aggressive, too fast for a supposed broken taillight. Officer Miller stepped out of the cruiser with a hostility that preceded any interaction. His questions were accusations. Andre, taught by his father and by life itself, kept his hands visible on the steering wheel. He was respectful, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. "License and registration," Miller barked. "Yes, sir. My registration is on the dashboard, right in front of me," Andre said, his voice clear. He moved his hands slowly, exactly as he'd been taught. But Miller saw a black kid in a hoodie, not a future soldier. He saw a threat where there was only compliance. He saw a ghost of his own prejudice. As Andre's fingers brushed the paper, Miller unholstered his weapon. 2 shots shattered the night. Quick. Final. The official report mentioned a sudden, furtive movement. It was a lie written in sterile, bureaucratic ink. When the call came, Marcus didn't roar. He didn't break. The grief was a chasm, but on its other side was a cold, hard clarity. A part of him he had buried long ago, the part that planned, that executed, that finished a fight, woke up. The city had taken his son. It had no idea what it had unleashed in the father. The church was filled with a silence that vibrated with unspoken grief and disciplined rage. It was a funeral for a son, a cadet, a beacon of hope for the community. The pews held weeping family members, stoic high school friends in their JROTC uniforms, and scattered throughout the crowd, men who, like Marcus, sat a little too straight and watched with eyes that missed nothing. They were ghosts from Marcus's past, veterans in civilian clothes whose military bearing was a language all its own. Across the street, 2 police cruisers were parked, a deliberate, watchful presence. They were not there to mourn, they were there to monitor. The pastor spoke of healing and forgiveness, but the words felt hollow. When he finished, Marcus stood. He didn't walk to the pulpit to share a tearful memory. Instead, he turned his body slightly, his gaze cutting through the stained glass light to fix on the officers outside. He didn't raise his voice, but every person in that church felt the temperature drop. "You have declared war," he said. The statement was flat, cold, and absolute. It wasn't a threat from a grieving father. It was a tactical assessment from a sergeant major. He then sat down. The service concluded in that heavy, charged silence. Later that evening, Marcus made 3 phone calls. There were no long explanations, just short, coded phrases understood only by those who had shared the crucible of combat with him. The calls went out to a former Navy SEAL, an Air Force intelligence analyst, and a Marine Force recon gunnery sergeant. They were the core of the Phantom Network, a brotherhood forged in fire, loyal not to a flag, but to the man who had led them through hell and brought them home. The response on the other end of each call was the same. A quiet, unquestioning, "Send the coordinates." The network was active. The war had begun. 3 days later, Police Chief Thompson stood at a podium, flanked by the city SEAL and a row of stern-faced officials. The press conference was a masterclass in deflection. Chief Thompson spoke of the tragic but justified shooting, painting a vague picture of Officer Miller fearing for his life. Andre was described as a young man who made a fateful decision to move suddenly. There was no mention of his JROTC record, his West Point ambitions, or the non-existent threat. It was a clean, polished lie designed to close the book. From a darkened room, Marcus watched the broadcast on a laptop, his face an unreadable mask of stone. The system would not correct itself. It had to be broken. That night, the Phantom Network held its first council of war in the cavernous, soundproofed basement of a VFW hall. Tasha, the ex-Air Force intelligence analyst, projected data onto a concrete wall. "Miller is a creature of habit," she stated, her voice calm and precise. "Leaves the same bar, at the same time, 3 nights a week. Zero situational awareness." "This isn't about revenge," Marcus said, his voice low. "It's about psychology. We don't create martyrs. We create nightmares. This is a psyop. Clean, quiet, and total." Officer Miller left O'Malley's pub just after midnight, arrogance in his stride. He never saw the 2 figures melt from the shadows of an alley. There was no sound, no struggle, no cry for help. The streetlights flickered, a car passed, and he was simply gone. It was a professional extraction, executed with chilling efficiency. At 2:06 a.m., his squad car was found idling by the side of an industrial road, driver's side door ajar. The responding officers found no signs of a fight, no blood, no shell casings. There was only one object left on the center of the driver's seat, placed with deliberate care, a heavy, bronze coin, embossed with the skull and crossed arrows of the U.S. Army Special Forces. A challenge coin. It was a message that the police department wouldn't understand, but one they knew to fear. It spoke of a discipline and capability far beyond their comprehension. This wasn't gang violence. This was something else entirely. The message of the challenge coin was followed by a public statement. 2 days later, Officer Jensen, Miller's partner, was found. He was not in a ditch or a warehouse, but in the most visible place they could find, the city's Central War Memorial Plaza. He was zip-tied to the base of a large bronze statue of a soldier, physically unharmed but trembling uncontrollably. His uniform was immaculate, his badge still clipped to his chest. Around his neck hung a professionally printed sign, its single word a judgment, dishonor. A morning news helicopter captured the image, and it went viral before Jensen was even cut loose. It was an act of profound, symbolic humiliation. He wasn't a victim of violence, he was an exhibit of shame, his cowardice starkly contrasted with the monument to bravery he was tied to. The police department, now gripped by a mixture of fear and fury, retaliated blindly. They didn't launch a sophisticated investigation, they launched a crackdown. The force descended on Marcus's neighborhood, looking to squeeze the community until something broke. Their primary target was Marcus's youth center. They tossed the place, intimidating the kids, their heavy-handed tactics meant as a clear warning. That warning found its mark in Malik, a bright 16-year-old whom Marcus had been personally mentoring, guiding him away from the streets and toward a trade school scholarship. Officers cornered Malik a block from the center, accusing him of matching a description. For the crime of wearing a hoodie and not showing enough fear, they beat him, leaving him with a cracked rib and a face swollen with bruises. When Marcus saw Malik in the hospital bed, the last vestiges of grief-fueled strategy burned away, replaced by a glacial, protective fury. This was no longer just about Andre's memory. They had now come for the future of other sons. He stood by Malik's bed, his expression hardening into something unbreakable. He had tried to build. They had chosen to destroy. The rules of engagement had just changed. Marcus knew that a war of attrition against street-level cops was a fool's errand. The true enemy wasn't the soldier on the front line, it was the general in the command tent. "They're hitting the kids," he told his team in the VFW basement. "It means they're scared. We're done with the pawns. It's time to go after the kingmaker." The focus shifted to a man whose name never appeared in the police reports, Richard Sterling, a powerful and untouchable real estate magnate. Tasha, the team's digital ghost, went to work. From her command center, a blacked-out room lit only by the glow of monitors, she began her hunt. This wasn't about brute force hacking. It was a patient, sophisticated intelligence operation. She peeled back the layers of Sterling's encrypted life, uncovering a vast network of shell corporations, illegal campaign donations, and backroom deals with city officials. She found the smoking gun, a money trail leading directly from one of Sterling's companies to a private fund controlled by Police Chief Thompson's wife. It was the payment for the cover-up. They didn't need to kidnap Sterling. The truth was a more effective weapon. Through an anonymous, untraceable channel, they sent him a single file. It contained a meticulously detailed summary of his financial crimes, enough to guarantee a federal indictment and the complete collapse of his empire. The message attached was simple. It gave him two options: record a full video confession detailing his role in pressuring Chief Thompson to bury Andre Washington's case, or the file would be sent to the Department of Justice and the IRS by sunrise. Trapped, with his life's work hanging by a thread, Sterling folded. He sat in his lavish home office, his face pale and sweating, and spoke to a camera. He confessed everything: his phone call to the chief, his reasons for wanting the case to disappear, and the financial leverage he held over the department. He was the picture of a powerful man brought to his knees not by a gun, but by information. Tasha's team received the video file an hour later. The kingmaker had just abdicated his throne. The video file landed in the inboxes of every major news outlet in the state like a digital bomb. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. Sterling's confession didn't just add a new dimension to the story, it rewrote it entirely. The narrative instantly shifted from a tragic police shooting to a story of systemic, deep-seated corruption linking the city's wealthiest elite to the highest levels of law enforcement. The city's power structure fractured. The mayor, implicated by his close ties to Sterling, held a disastrous press conference, stammering through denials that no one believed. Sterling's confession had named names, and the fire spread. Inside the police department, a civil war erupted. The trust that holds such an organization together evaporated overnight. Honest officers, feeling betrayed, started leaking information to reporters. Corrupt officers, suddenly exposed, turned on one another, trying to cut deals. Chief Thompson, now a pariah, went into seclusion, refusing all calls. To accelerate the collapse, Tasha deployed a second weapon. She leaked a key piece of internal evidence, a department-wide memo, authored by Chief Thompson himself just hours after Andre's death. The memo didn't mention the shooting directly but ordered a temporary suspension of body camera data uploads for all sensitive cases pending administrative review. It was the procedural evidence of a cover-up, a direct command to suppress the truth. This second leak broke the dam. Protesters, now armed with irrefutable proof, descended on City Hall in the thousands. Their numbers were so great, their cause so undeniably just, that the police made no move to stop them. They simply held the line, their faces a mixture of fear and resignation. The pressure became unbearable. By the end of the day, the governor had announced a state-level investigation, and the U.S. Department of Justice declared it was launching a full federal probe into the city's police department. The system wasn't just cracking, it was being torn apart from the inside out. With his department in ruins and federal agents descending on the city, Police Chief Thompson became the final target. The Phantom Network's last move wasn't physical, it was a masterpiece of psychological warfare designed to dismantle the man himself. The campaign was silent and subtle. One evening, Thompson came home to his sterile, high-rise condo to find the American flag from his desk display, a gift for his years of service, perfectly folded into the tight triangle of a military funeral. There was no sign of forced entry. Another day, a single black chess pawn, polished to a shine, appeared on his office desk. It was a symbol of a sacrificed son. He started seeing shadows in his peripheral vision, hearing whispers in static. His paranoia became a prison, every ticking clock a countdown to a fate he couldn't see. He was a man haunted by ghosts he had helped create. The final, decisive strike came a week later. The kill shot. After tireless work, Tasha's team had accomplished the impossible. They had navigated the deep, encrypted archives of the police department's cloud storage and recovered the original, unedited body camera footage from Officer Miller's device, a file that had been professionally deleted and scrubbed within an hour of the shooting. It was released anonymously online. The footage was clear, high definition, and damning. It showed Andre, calm and compliant. It showed Miller's unprovoked aggression. It captured Andre saying, "My registration is right here, sir," his hand moving slowly toward the dash. It showed the 2 gunshots, followed by Miller cursing under his breath, and his partner Jensen hysterically whispering, "He didn't have anything, man. He didn't have anything." The truth, in its raw and brutal form, was now free. There was no spin, no denial possible. The video was the trial and the verdict all in one. Within hours, Chief Thompson announced his immediate resignation. The next morning, federal agents, not local police, arrested Miller and Jensen at their homes, leading them away in handcuffs. The system had finally, irrevocably, turned on itself and consumed its own. The war was over. The city, stripped of its corrupt leadership, began the slow, painful process of rebuilding from the ashes of its own lies. The change was tectonic. Marcus Washington's name was never mentioned in a single news report. He remained a ghost, the silent architect of a revolution fought in the shadows. He didn't want a victory parade, he wanted a legacy for his son. Months later, he stood across the street from a new mural that covered the entire side of a brick building. It was a portrait of Andre, not as a victim, but as the proud JROTC cadet he was, his eyes full of hope, a halo of golden light painted behind his head. As Marcus watched, a group of teenagers from his youth center walked by. One of them, a boy named Malik, now walking tall and straight, caught his eye. The boy didn't speak. He simply gave a slow, respectful nod. Marcus returned it, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them. The city wouldn't build a statue for Marcus, but the real monument was here, in the quiet nod of a young man with a future, and in the enduring memory of a son whose sacrifice had forced a city to finally face the truth. Justice hadn't been given, it had been taken. Thank you for watching. The fight for justice and honor never truly ends. To show your support for those who continue that fight, even after their service is over, please comment "respect" below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that need to be told.